Guys, so we're going to dive into jQuery a little bit. jQuery is one of the popular, probably mixed feelings about in regards to a library within JavaScript. Some say it's dead, some say it's still relevant. It's just going to depend a lot on the organization and what you want to do, whether or not they want to use a library like jQuery. But just like Bootstrap, it's a good idea to have an idea what it is and how it's used and know how to learn more about it. It's too large to cover entirely in our class, but we're going to play with it a little bit using this particular web page you see right here as an example. So it's very simplistic. There's not a whole lot of stuff onto it. It's just some images and a header and a footer and stuff like that. But what we're going to do with jQuery is give it some dynamic actions. So what would happen whenever we're finished, if we click on menu, it would actually do a drop-down menu. So let's go ahead and get started focusing on jQuery. And then in a separate video, I'll go more into the assignment, which is going to include some components from the HTML and CSS class, because it's really hard to separate that because they are so intertwined. But this focus is just going to, this particular video is just going to focus on jQuery and just a few different elements and components of the library. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started here. So jQuery, as I mentioned before, is a JavaScript library. It calls upon an external file, typically named jquery.js. So just like style.css, when we call upon an external file, whether it's local, like a local file within our own folder structure, or an external link such as Bootstrap, we're calling upon an external source. And the same thing like this. So you have a external file named jquery.js, or you can actually do a CDN, which is a content delivery network, and bring it in. But let's see. For our purposes, we're just going to focus on the jquery.js. To use the jQuery library in index.html, it must to use the jQuery library in index.html, it must load with other dependencies. I don't think I got that right. So you're going to see me like proofread some of my stuff while I'm doing this video. Must load to use the jQuery library in index.it must load with other dependencies. There are two ways to add jQuery. I mentioned earlier we're going to you can include a file named jquery.js. You can name it whatever you want, but just kind of stick with something that's simplistic, such as jquery.js, or you can use the CDN. Again, for our purposes, we're going to just use a file, local file. It says because the .js file may have dependencies on the HTML page, it's typically added towards the end of the HTML document before the closing body tag. So you can see you have a body, and then on line 13 is their closing body tag, and this is where we add our jquery.js file. Where we've been adding some things in the past had been in the head, and sometimes that's fine. You can do async or defer. And it probably just depends on what you're using and what just flows best. There's not always going to be a clear-cut answer on how to do everything. It just kind of depends upon the situation. And on this situation, we're saying to load it right before the end of the closing body tag. So jQuery methods. I like the example that I read was comparing it to Lego blocks. So remember Lego blocks whenever you were a kid, or if you have kids, you can build entire cities and all kinds of cool stuff with Lego blocks. But if you do a single piece, like one single block at a time, it's going to take forever. And but you can do it. It's just going to take a very long time and all the frustrations that can come with that. But if you have prefab pieces, like they come in kits and whatever it is that they do now, I don't really stay on top of it. But there's little kits that can already have like prefab roads or prefab buildings or starships. I know there's a lot of Star Wars stuff with it. It's already prefabbed, so you can just put those bigger pieces together, those prefab pieces, and it'll help you build your city that much faster. So think of of jQuery as the prefab pieces. Like, you don't have to worry about the individual components and the individual pieces within the prefab. You just know what's going to work because it's there and somebody else put it together. So some examples of the jQuery methods, like I said, are the Lego prefab blocks, are hide, show, fade in, and fade out. The ones we're going to play with this video are hide and show. So ready to run code as soon as the document is ready, instead of waiting for images and other things to download. You can use the ready event. It waits until the HTML page's DOM, the document object model, is ready to manipulate. And you should wrap all JavaScript behavior inside ready method. This makes sure that the web page is rendered in the browser before the jQuery code executes. So what that's saying is, remember, the DOM has this document object model. So there's the various elements that it looks for. It's going to look for a head. It's going to look for a heading. It's going to look for certain elements like an H1 tag or a P tag or a nav tag. It's going to look for certain things, these little nodes that's in the document object model. So if if that's not rendered yet, just make sure that the web page is rendered in the browser before the jQuery code executes. So if the jQuery code tries to execute on some sort of node that's in the DOM, but it's still rendering, if the page is still rendering, it's not going to find it, and it can produce an error or some sort of bug. So an example of using the jQuery code, the ready event is, so we have, I'll explain all this other little stuff later on, but this is basically represents jQuery, the document we're in, and then here's the ready method. And you'll notice this kind of flubbed me up a couple times. After the word ready, it's an open parentheses and an open parentheses and then the closed parentheses. This is the little fat arrow, or the function arrow, which was started being used in ES6. And then your code would go here in the green area. So here's the explanation of this particular little example. The ready method waits until the browser finishes rendering the HTML document before triggering the callback function. So whatever code was going to happen in here, it's not going to happen until this document, the HTML document, is completely rendered, because we get this in here. Let's see. The jQuery behavior is written in the callback function, which is in this green area. So let's talk about targeting. I said targeting can be done based on class, ID, or tag. So an example is document dot ready, then the function, and that's all that's in that example. So the explanation on that, we're going to go into some of the syntax here now. The document is a special keyword used to target HTML document, to target the HTML document that you're currently in. And what it does, it creates a jQuery object. So you can use the dollar symbol and then the open close parentheses to create a jQuery object for the element in a web page. So this dollar symbol and then open parentheses, document, and that close parentheses, that creates a jQuery object, which is going to allow us to do whatever jQuery stuff we're wanting us to do. So we can pass string inside this little dollar symbol, open close parentheses, to target elements by ID, class, or tag. So after we target the ID, class, or tag, we can use the dot notation to attach a handler method that triggers the callback function. So here's an example of targeting by class. Do I not have any snippets in here yet? Oh, there they are. Okay. So here's an example of targeting by class. So we have the dollar symbol sign, and that is actually an alias for jQuery. So dollar symbol sign is a lot shorter and easier to type instead of jQuery. So, like I said, the dollar symbol is just another way that you can write jQuery. So the class is right here in between the two parentheses. You'll notice there's two single quotes as well. I think double quotes will work. I'm not 100% certain. But you'll notice that period was supposed to go after that parentheses. See, those are the little errors that mess you up. So what this is going to be is a class name, and then the handler method. So I already said the dollar symbol is an alias for jQuery, and this is the class name that we're going to be using. It says classes are signified with the use of a period, which I kept moving around here. And as I mentioned before in the last class that we all had together, the way that I first learned to remember which period or hashtag goes with what class or ID is I got my period in class. Sorry if that offends, but it's the way I remember. So here we got a little bit of a snippet. And let's see. So trying to think how I want to do this. Okay, let's see how well this will flow. So let's go. I got a little snippet down here on lines 16 and 17 is what I'm getting ready to explain. This is on an HTML document, and you'll see that it's enclosed by opening and closing script tags. So on line 16, so we got the dollar symbol is an alias for jQuery. Document is a special keyword to indicate the HTML document currently in. The .ready method is the method to telling the browser to run the code as soon as it's ready instead of waiting for other items to download. And let's see, the fat arrow or the function arrow declared a function using ES6 styling. So in line 17 of the code below, again, the dollar symbol is an alias for jQuery. And this is just like a best practice thing so yourself and developers can know that it's like, hey, you're working with some jQuery stuff. This .product photo is the class name that we're using. Let's see. And it was declared elsewhere in the document. The show method is a jQuery method that shows the content specified. In this case, it's going to be the content in the product-photo. So let's see. I'll go ahead and finish this, and then we'll do a separate exercise and a separate video because I'm not sure if that's prepared right the way I want it. So let's go ahead and finish this. So teaching by ID. Targets a single element by ID. Remember, an ID is unique. There's only one element can be used in that ID. Just kind of like think of it like your social security number or your school ID number. You're the only one that can have it. An ID, there's only one element that can have it. So here's an example. It's very similar to what we were doing with class. Okay, the only difference is that instead of a period, it's got a hashtag. That's pretty much the same thing other than that. So let's go over this. So the dollar symbol represents an alias for jQuery. The document is saying that it's like this is the document that we're working with. The ready method tells the content to go ahead and once the HTML page is loaded, to go ahead and start processing it instead of waiting for other downloads. The dollar symbol here is, again, an alias for jQuery. This is the unique ID that we're having, and you can see it's got the hashtag in front of it instead of the period. And then the jQuery method we're going to use is hide, and that's represented by .hide. So jQuery objects, as I've said a few times, the dollar symbol is an alias for jQuery functions. The dollar symbol and jQuery are interchangeable. It just lets prone to typos if you have one character instead of 1, 2, 5, 6, spelling out jQuery. Jquery function takes the parameter that target an element, such as the nav menu ID, and turns it into a jQuery object. This allows you to call any jQuery method into the jQuery object. So in the above snippet, the nav dropdown is a jQuery object in this example. Let's see. Okay, so using, like I said, these dollar symbols helps make them into jQuery objects. So you can also save jQuery objects as variables. So here's an example. We got we're declaring a variable with the word const. This dollar symbol jQuery object is the name of the variable we are declaring. It must start with the dollar symbol, equals, just like we usually do with variables. Again, the dollar symbol is an alias for the word jQuery, and whatever we're going to, what kind of value we're going to provide to our variable. Let's see. Okay, so this stuff right here, the very first line, line 16, represents jQuery. It's a special keyword saying it's this document. And this is saying that, we're ready as soon as HTML page is loaded, we're ready. This is declaring the variable. The name of the variable is nav dropdown. This dollar symbol indicates it's a jQuery object. The variable nav dropdown equals another jQuery object of the ID of nav dropdown. And then now we're going to, whenever we see the nav dropdown, we're going to hide it. So event handlers, the on method is what we're going to talk about here. It adds event handlers to the jQuery object. It takes two parameters. There's a string declaring the event to listen for, which is the handler, and the callback function to fire when the event is detected. So an example here is declaring the dollar symbol, same thing as jQuery. The ID is login. The event handler, or the event handler, it starts with the .on notation. Then click is going to be represented. What it is when you click on something. And what's going to happen when somebody clicks on it is the login form is going to show. Okay, so going on further down. So the first few lines is the same thing that we've already gone over. So the only thing I'm going to elaborate more is on line 20 here. So the dollar symbol menu button is a variable that was declared on line 17, which was const the dollar symbol menu button. It says on click is the event handler telling the menu button, as you can see right here, that when it's clicked, it's going to show the nav dropdown, which is on line 21. Okay, so this is all for this video, and the next video I'll be using this, and I'll be actually using the code as a demonstration. Okay, thank you.